If you work as a manufacturing facilities engineer, installing a new piece of equipment can be as complex as the machinery itself. From prep work to alignment and testing, it's your team's job to put it all together. That's why it's good to have Grainger on your side. With industrial-grade products and next-day delivery, Grainger helps ensure you have everything you need close at hand through every step of the installation. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Blog Talk Radio.
The following broadcast is brought to you by the iGolf Sports Network.
Golf Talk Live is sponsored by the iGolf Sports Network and Golf Tips Magazine. Here's Andrew to tell you more about our sponsors.
iGolf Sports is a live stream broadcast and media production company providing quality programming designed to attract the golfing enthusiast. And Golf Tips, the game's most in-depth instruction magazine, including reviews on the latest equipment, tips from top teaching professionals, all designed to help you improve from tee to green. Welcome to Golf Talk Live with your host, Ted Odorico. Join Ted each week as he speaks with some of the best in golf. This week's special guest will join us a bit later. But first up is another great discussion on Coach's Corner. So let's introduce tonight's Coach's Corner panel.
All right, good evening, everybody, and once again, welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and we've got a great show for you this evening. I've got a couple of guys lined up for the Coach's Corner panel, and one of them's front and center right now. We're just waiting for the other one to chime in. Hopefully he'll be joining us shortly. And then a little bit later on, I'm going to be speaking with tonight's featured guests. There's actually three of them. Peggy Rhodes-White, Tiffany White, her daughter, and Dr. Carl Sales, all from the Ted Rhodes Foundation. They'll be joining us a little bit later on in the broadcast, so I'm really excited to have them back. I've had the two ladies on before many times, and Dr. Sales will be joining us for the first time, but excited to have him as well from the organization. We'll give you all the details, if you will, a little bit later on. But just to remind everybody, of course, we are live every Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m. Central, unless otherwise stated. And really, as I said, excited to have them on. And for some reason, if you can't join us live, you can go to blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, and you can scroll down to the on-demand section and check us out there. So on that note, we're going to get to Coach's Corner, but first let's hear from the Coach's Corner sponsor. They've got a special offer just for you.
This segment of Coach's Corner is brought to you by Brush Tee. Ready to maximize every drive this season? Grab every yard? Take the advantage. Approved by the RNA and USGA, it's not cheating, but seems like it is. Brush Tee, a premium and innovative tee, features fast flex bristles that cradle the ball to create a nearly frictionless impact zone to gain unexpected yardage. Visit brushtee.com and use promo code GolfTips for a 10% discount. That's brushtee.com, promo code GolfTips for 10% off your next order.
All right, so let me introduce the Coach's Corner panel. I'm going to introduce the one that's here first, and I'll give the other one as well a few moments to hopefully chime in. Otherwise, my guest that's here he and I will be holding down the fort on the Coach's Corner panel. So first up, of course, is Pete Buchanan. Pete's been teaching golf for over 30 years and is the founder and director of instruction at Plain Simple Golf, of course, which houses the Plain Simple Golf Circuit and the Simple Swing Repeater Training Breaks. Pete has helped golfers focus on building a more repeatable swing. Hopefully joining us tonight as well will be John Hughes. John is a PGA Master Professional. He is also the honorary president of the North Florida PGA section, and he is a recipient of the PGA of America's Professional Development Award. He's a senior contributing editor and a top 25 instructor with Golf Tips Magazine, and is the 2023 North Florida PGA Teacher and Coach of the Year. So for now, let's welcome Pete Buchanan to the show. And as I said, hopefully John will be chiming in shortly here. But Pete, welcome to Coach's Corner.
Yeah, thanks, Ted. It's good to be here. Looking forward to it.
No problem. And I see in the background we've got the hounds tuning in, and that's always good.
Yep.
Yep. That's all right.
Yeah,
I've been down that road. Always sounds good to have that in the
pretty
background.
good, but But every now and then they see somebody they don't recognize.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for mine to chime in too. So she's a little louder, a little high pitch. But always great to have you on the panel. And tonight's discussion, I really hope John is able to make it. I just shot him a text. He may be, as many have in the past, sometimes still be out in the golf course or in the middle of a lesson. So I don't certainly hold that against you guys. Business comes first, and this is sort of a luxury, if you will, to be able to come on here afterwards. So
Yep.
We'll keep an eye out for John. But so Pete, here's the topic we're going to talk about tonight, and that is making golf fun again. And I want to clarify this for a second, because one of the things, and I had this discussion actually Tuesday on my other show with Cindy Miller, of course, is the co-host of the show with me, and she's an LPGA professional. We talked about many of the topics here, and I certainly want you to feel free to insert some other topics, or not other topics, but other points, how we can make things more fun again. And the reason why I say that is certainly overall, I think a lot of people get out and have a lot of enjoyment in this game. But sometimes people get a little bit bored. They get into a routine, and sometimes, they're not having as much fun. And we want people to get out there and enjoy themselves as much as possible, because that's really the main reason you play golf, is to have fun and to have a good time with your friends and loved ones if they're into golf. So I've put together a few points here that we're going to touch on tonight, and one of them I think is kind of fun, and it's kind of interesting, and I want to sort of preface this a little bit as well, to get your response. So one of the points I put here is, if you were playing an event, it doesn't have to be a professional event, any event, and you were limited to playing only 5 clubs in your bag, and you can use any course you're familiar with, so you know the lay of the land, or you can pick something, you don't have to specify the course, but you can be thinking of a course that you play regularly when you're making your selection. But I want you to think of clubs which you have in your bag.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Well, I would have to say
it's not easy.
No,
it's not easy, is it?
I think more than anything else, because you can turn some clubs into other clubs. I think I'd probably go with a putter, a 9-iron, a 6-iron, a hybrid, and a driver. I think I'd take those 5, because I think the 6 I can turn into most anything else, along with a hybrid, and the 9 can turn into a wedge, and it's always nice to have your putter with you. So I think I'd take those 5. I think I could probably handle just about any shot that comes along with those 5.
That's a good choice.
So
I would do it a little bit differently. I think my 5, I'm going to throw the drive, even though I'm hitting my driver well and my longer woods. I think for me, I'm going to stick my hybrid. I got a number 4 hybrid in there, and I can smoke that one down pretty good. So I can easily get over 200 yards with it. So for me, I'm going to throw in my number 4 hybrid in there. I'm going to take my 7-iron, much like your 6-iron. I can turn that into a lot of different options there. And then I'm going to have 2 wedges. I'm going to have my pitching wedge. Again, I can, decrease the loft a little bit and turn that into a 9-iron, even an 8 if I really wanted to. And then, of course, sand wedge. You never know if you're going to hit that bunker. And then, of course, my putter. So those would be my 5 selection. I'm going to leave the driver out, even the 3-wood out, because I don't really care so much about hitting long distances as I do about my accuracy. So I want to make sure that whatever shot I hit, I'm going to be in play. So those would be my 5 clubs. And I thought it was interesting because it challenges you, and it can be a lot of fun because, to add a little bit more, and I want to get your thoughts on this, is if you're, and you got to be fair about it when you'll understand what I mean. If you're playing with a regular foursome, you can have a setup where they pick your 5 clubs. So obviously you're going to bring all the clubs to the course, but you're only allowed to keep 5 in your bag. So if you're playing, let's say you've got a foursome and you're playing pairs, each of you can pick one of the guys from the other twosome, let's say, and you can pick what clubs they can carry in their bag. So you can make it even a little bit more challenging and somewhat seem a little bit unfair. What do you think about that? Does that sort of resonate with in your mind to make things a little more interesting out in the golf course?
Oh, yeah, that'd be a lot of fun, especially getting to pick what somebody else gets to hit, especially
right.
if you know what their game's like. Yeah, you could.
Right.
You could be fair, but you could also be a little bit, I'm going to challenge him like crazy too and give him some clubs I know he might struggle with. So it would make it more fun that way. I think just to be able to, you don't get your own, somebody else has to pick them for you. I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you can do it both ways. I mean, you can do it initially maybe to sort of break the ice. Maybe the first few times you pick your own, and then once you kind of, and again, if you've been playing with your foursome, that let's say Bob plays his his 5-wood or his hybrid or whatever is really good with it. So you pull that out of his bag. So you take away that advantage. So now he's forced to play other clubs to make up for it. So it can be very, very challenging. I think it can be a lot of fun as well by doing that, by making it, and you just do it on the honor system. You flip a coin who starts first, and you just go around in the group, and then each person goes into the other. Well, I mean, within reason, you just say, I'm pulling your 7-iron out, or I'm pulling your wedge out, and you just leave them with five clubs. I think though, and again, you've got to be careful. Maybe what I would probably add on is saying the putter's the only one you can't touch, and that's just mainly not for making it unfair. I know, because you can putt with the other clubs, but you want to be mindful of slow play too. So you don't want to create a scenario where people are really struggling on the green. So maybe you could say, okay, the putter's off limits, but every other club is fair game. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree with that too. So make the putting as normal as possible, and then because really it's more the shot making that you're trying to get, not only making it more fun, but I think just from an overall instruction standpoint, it's a great learning tool, because now you're going to have to figure out how to make shots with different clubs, and so it's going to create more things that you can do with your own game that you probably didn't think you could do before.
And you're right, and it's actually a great way in a practice session with students. I mean, you can do the same thing. Instead of you're not necessarily playing a lot of holes, but maybe you've got a couple of holes that you're going to take them out on the golf course, and you can say, okay, you're only allowed to take these 3 clubs or these 4 clubs with you. So now you've got to be creative. So you might be have a shot where you've got a long way still to the green, but your longest club might only be a 6-iron or a 5-iron or whatever the case may be. So now all of a sudden you've really got to think, okay, now it becomes more strategy, and you got to think a little bit more smartly about that. So I just thought that was sort of an interesting thing that you don't really see a lot of out there, but I think would make for an interesting challenge and certainly make for good times. The other one is, speaking of foursomes, and I want to get your thought. Again, there's a number of ways you can play this. We get into a little bit of a routine. We have our buddies that we play with, or maybe, if you're somebody that plays in couples arrangements, so maybe you and your wife or partner are playing another couple regularly, that's fine too. I think it's good once in a while to mix up your foursomes. I think instead of playing with the same group week in, week out, and I'll touch on some advantages of that after I give you an opportunity, but this is another one I think can be fun, is instead of always playing with the same group every week, mix it up once in a while. Your thoughts here?
Oh, I totally agree. It just, not only is it a chance to get to know other people, but it's just to see different ways that people play, different games, how they go about playing it, different strategies and how they play. So watching different people play the game within your own, round that you're doing is a great advantage. And I think it's, something that, especially as a kid, I remember working at the club, we got to do that a lot because we played with the members all the time. And so we got to play with a lot of different groups. And, amazingly enough, you learn from all of them, especially we used to call them the step and fetch it boys, the ones that were in their 80s, because when they hit it, you could step and fetch it and get it back for them. But those guys around the greens were dynamite. Goodness gracious, were they good. So, just going out there and watching how they played shots, and it wasn't always your standard, a guy'd be 40 yards off the green, and you look back and said, "Did you just hit that with a 4-iron?" Yeah. Okay. And you roll it right up there about 2 feet from the hole. I said, all right. But I definitely think it's an eye-opening way for you to see how other people play golf.
When I was growing up, this was a learning experience for me. I mean, I've taught me the game, but, obviously we weren't always able to play. And I did have a group of friends back home that we played pretty regularly in our group. But I often used to like going up to the golf course and joining in other groups. And the reason I did that was for two reasons. You mix up the conversation. I mean, if you're playing with the same four guys or whatever the case is, week in, week out, you pretty much know their lives after a few seasons or over, many years. And, not saying that, you can't gin up the conversation somewhat, but it kind of gets a little stale after a while. So playing with new people, you get to hear other people's stories. And also what I used to like to do is I always, before I actually started working in the industry, I knew a couple of the pros in the shop, and I would say, hey, the better players up here, the better members and whatnot. I want to make sure if you've got a threesome, twosome, whatever of good players, pop me in with them, because I always wanted to, kind of what you alluded to, I wanted to kind of learn and see other ways of approaching this game. So it was always a learning experience for me as I got to watch some of these guys and how they handled themselves out in the golf course. And there were some really good players, both young and old, and I enjoyed playing with them. And not that I didn't enjoy playing with my friends, but it was a different experience. So I absorbed that, to help me become a better player overall. So I think there's some advantages to doing that as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, well, one of the other things we used to do too, just from a club standpoint, as working at the club, by playing with all the different members, we could ask them, about the club, about the tournaments. How do you like the tournaments we're running? How do you like this event or that event? So we got a ton of feedback from the members, both positive and negative, to help us run the business more efficiently. So, even just from that standpoint, it was a great way to do it.
Oh, for sure. And that's, to me, I look at it as, like I said, a real learning opportunity, because you can create so many, but also too, I think it was kind of nice just to, as I said, hear other people's stories. What do they do? What do they do for a living? What are they, what's their, extracurricular activities besides golf? What do they like to do? Where do they live? And that sort of thing. And, what's their occupation? So it was just kind of a, different conversation. And then, then you had something else to come back, and, when you jump back into your foursome the next week, or maybe later that week, you could say, hey, I play with a group of guys, we had some, funny experiences or whatever. So it's just a way of kind of mixing it up and making it more fun out there. Another one too, I think is, and again, it's sort of tapping into more of a creative side of things as well, but playing alternate formats. So not necessarily playing stroke play all the time, but playing a different format and how you handle yourself on the golf. So maybe, you're going to play best ball, or you're going to do that type of thing. Is this something that, you found yourself, not just for yourself playing, but with your students, to try to encourage them to have a variety of ways of approaching this game, just, again, to kind of mix it up a bit?
Oh, absolutely. We try to make sure that, every time they go out, especially with the juniors, you're trying to get them to play different types of games, from Stableford to, alternate shot to, any of the formats that are out there. So try to switch it up as often as you can, just to get a feel for different ways to play and different shots to play and different formats to play in. And you start to find, one of those formats, you're pretty good at. And so, you can find tournaments that are like that to play in, that sort of suit the best way that you are more comfortable on the golf course playing. I was always comfortable playing match play. So I always tried to make sure we did individual matches amongst the group, so we get out there and say, well, you and I are going to play head-to-head in the front nine. Those two will play head-to-head, then we'll switch on the back, or we'll, play alternate shot. And one of the other things I like to do with my juniors, too, with playing is I take the par threes. I said, you got to cut the yardage in half and hit that club. And the par fours, you got to cut it by thirds and hit that club. And on the par fives, you have to cut it in fourths, that club. So if it's 300 yards on a par four, you hit 3 100-yard shots. And now you're challenging yourself to try to make pars. So just a different way to break it down. And it's amazing. They'll come back and say, I played pretty good today doing that. I say, yeah, it's amazing how you don't have to blast it all the time, do you, to score? Yeah, so it's a great way for them to figure out, just playing shots, they can play better. Well,
one of the reasons why, I really wanted to have this conversation tonight was, too often, and we know this being in the industry, we look at the stats and, you're still in a situation, despite all of the advancements in that, where really probably 50%, if not more, of the golfers out there are still struggling to break 100. Yeah. And so, and it's not through, lack of effort on the industry side. I think there's obviously always room for improvement. We've had a lot of advancements, a lot of technologies come in that have helped things. And obviously, the players have to do their part by getting more involved and practicing a little bit more efficiently. But the truth of the matter is, when you have a scenario like that where people are really struggling with their game, and you have to find ways of being, creative. In other words, finding ways of mixing it up, just like we've all talked about here many times on the show, out in the practice tee, out in the driving range. Instead of just raking and hitting balls, let's create some, invent some scenarios or situations that we may be faced with, and imagine hitting those same shots out in the practice tee. That's the reason we do that is so they can visualize what they might be faced with until they actually get out in the golf course. So it's the same thing with this, is we want to create different opportunities for them to alter their game, obviously, still playing within rules and that, but altering their game or altering formats in order to make it a little bit more interesting, a little bit more fun. Now, that doesn't mean you have to permanently change it, but just to throw something in there every once in a while and do something different. And another one is, and this seems very simple, but even moving up to the forward tees. That's a given one anyways, but what are your thoughts here, and how do you see that as really, creating a different platform, I guess, for some of the golfers out there, especially the ones that are struggling, if we move it up a little bit?
Technology is especially as we've gotten older, and you've seen this as well as I have. We can still bump it out there in pretty good ways because the equipment is so much better. But I tell all the people that I play with, I said, look, when I'm going on the golf course today, they say, well, what yardage do you play? I said, I won't play any par threes that are longer than 175 yards. So whatever that falls into the scorecard line is the yardage I'm going to play. And it usually works out to be between 6,100 and 6,300 yards. And at 61 years old, that's long enough because I can go out and I can score like I used to score when I was playing tournaments because the yardage fits more with what I do now. So it's a lot more fun to be able to get out there and play that way. And I tell all the groups that I teach and all of them, I said, move up. It's funny you mentioned that because I had a couple of guys that they're both in their mid-70s, and they were kind of complaining about their scoring. And I said, hey, let me ask you. I said, you guys are playing the same course you used to play when you were in your teens. I said, when you were 17 years old, what two clubs did you hit on the first par 4? Oh, I hit driver 7-iron. I said, well, why don't you move up so you can hit driver 7-iron now and make it the same game? And one of them said, well, I might have to tee up, a third of the way down the fairway. I said, so what? What difference does it make? Go make it.
Yeah, you're 7. Yeah, you're 7. And that's the whole point.
Yeah. I said, age has its privileges on the golf course. You go play from wherever the heck you want to play from. It doesn't make any difference. If it's a driver and a 7-iron, because I do that, quite honestly. I have some tour players that I coach in Orlando, and when we go play, I do the same thing. I said, guys, what do you guys hit on this hole, driver wedge? I said, all right, I'm going to tee off so it's a driver and a wedge for me so we can play the same game. Because otherwise, we pull up to a 220-yard par 3. They're hitting 7 or 6-iron, and I'm looking at 3-wood. It's not the same game.
Right. Yeah.
So if we're going to play the same game, I'm going to hit the same clubs you are.
Well, exactly. And you raise you raise a valid point. When you're in your 20s or late teens or what have you, and you're hitting a good ball, you're knocking it down there. You can generate a lot more club head speed. When you get up into your 60s, 70s, and a little bit later, you don't have the same flexibility. You don't have the same, strength that you did, 30, 40 years ago. So you're not going to hit the ball. And, you can make adjustments. You can get clubs, and it'll help you get a few extra yards here and there. But you're never going to be the same as you were at that age. So you need to find other ways. And this is, again, goes to what I was talking about. Number one, this is why so many people struggle to break 100, 90, what have you. But also the fun factor has slipped away over the years because people cannot play the game they once did So they're kind of deflated a little bit. That they get out there and I just don't play as like I used to. But they're playing the same circumstances they did 40 years ago. Well, you can't do that. So move the tee up. What I used to do actually with students, beginning students, until I really had a good feel for them, I would move them right from the get-go. The first time we would do a playing lesson, we're going to play from the forward tees. And they're like, well, wow, I'm going to drive the green. I said, great. I said, here's what we're going to do. What do you typically score? Okay, great. We're going to play from this set of tees until you can comfortably shoot, that score. Then we're going to move a set of tees back until you can no longer do that. So, we would come to a number that they were comfortable, and then we would move back. And when they got to a set of tees that they could no longer comfortably do that, then I said, you need to move to the one for that and start playing from that. And then when that is no longer possible, you need to move forward again until you get up and, like you said, midway out in the fairway if you have to. But, you have to be creative in order to find ways of making the game more fun. And I think that's what a lot of the problem is for many players, especially our high handicap players, is they're more focused on trying to perfect everything and not really focusing on, hey, let's just go out there and have fun.
Right.
Your thoughts on that?
Right.
Right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When we used to set up the golf course, when I was even a junior, working on Tuesday, ladies' day was Tuesday mornings for us. We would go out. We had 3 or 4 sets of tee markers we put out in the fairways to move them up. And so we'd go up to them and say, hey, you're playing the green tees today. Well, we don't have green tees to see how you do. You'll find them. Just keep driving down the fairway till you see them. And that's where you're going to play. And they would come back in and say, oh, we had such a great time today. I've never hit, number 4 in 2 shots before. Well, we put the tees, 110 yards away, but that's okay. But it's all about trying to get a different experience and them something different every Tuesday or anytime you go out to play, just to make it, way easier to do that. And I like the scenario you were talking about. I use it a lot with my juniors because they talk about scoring. And they say, oh, it's too easy from the front tees. I said, well, stay up there until you can shoot under par. And then once you shoot under par, you can back up. And you stay on those until you can do it again. And some of them, they're there for a while because they figured out, hey, wait a minute, it's different here. I got to figure out how to play this game from these shorter tees. Yeah, you do. But if you shoot under par from there, you can back up. But I like the situation you're talking about. When they start to struggle, they go back forward again. Yeah. And I think we have to get away from this being all about, bombing it off the tee and hitting those wedges into the thing. I think for the masses, it's more about let's get you a distance where you can have a lot more fun, hit a lot more shots that are into the green that are 7-iron, 8-iron, 9-iron wedge, sand wedge, instead of hitting 3-wood, hybrid, 5-wood, 7-wood. You're so far back, and those shots are so hard to hit on the greens anyway. I think, and I guess some people say, well, then you'd have 9 sets of tees. So what? What difference does it make? You can put tee markers in the fairway. They can tee it up in the fairway and play from there. It's just about making the game a lot more fun. And they're talking about these courses that, they're trying to lengthen them all so they can have a tour event. I said, yeah, well, what percentage of courses throughout the world are going to have tour events? The rest of them need to have 9 sets of tees so we can make it more fun.
And I mean, there used to be a lot more executive-style courses out there. Right. And, people, growing up, we used to have a lot of fun on those. And, we obviously weren't hitting as far, as we got a little bit older. But the point is it was something that you could easily reach the green. Even some of the executive ones, some of them typically might be all par 3s, but we had a few executive courses near where I lived where they actually did have some par 4s. They didn't have a par 5, but they had par 4s in there, and they still classified as an executive because they were short par 4s. But, we had a lot of fun as kids growing up. But going back to the point that I was making earlier is when you're dealing with 50+% of the population that is struggling to break 100. And if you're, depending on what stats you want to, listen to, if you're looking at 25+ million golfers and, 12.5 to 13 million cannot break 100, that's a problem. So what do you do to make it fun and interesting for them? And another point I want to throw in here is, and I think this is especially for, if you're a 25+ handicap, and you're struggling with your game, and you want to go out and have fun, here is a great way to do it, and I'll get your thoughts on the other side of this. Stop keeping score. Don't even bother writing it down. Write down if you made the fairway. Write down if you hit the green in regulation, how many putts. Keep your stats. By all means, do that, but do not keep your score. And the reason I say that is sometimes people get so caught up on those numbers. On, I've got a par 5 coming up, or I've got a par 4, and I've got to make par here because if I don't, I won't break this, or I won't do that, or I'm going to have a bad first 9. Stop keeping score for a little while and just get out there, play, and have some fun. What do you think about that strategy?
No, I think that's a great way to do it. There's a lot more to playing golf than what the end number is when you finish. And I think if you just don't focus on that and just go around and have fun with the shots you're playing, play shots, experiment a little bit. I think it takes a lot of the pressure off if you're just not worried about what the total score is. Just go out and have some fun and hit some shots, and make it to where you're just trying to to do some things that you ordinarily wouldn't do. That way, you're just not worrying about what the total score is. Yeah, and I like keeping your stats. Did you hit the fairway? How many greens did you hit? How many shots inside of 40 yards did you play? How many putts? And I think that can give you an idea of not only, what the overall game looks like, but you can also start to see where you really struggle from. And most people are going to find out it's not the longer shots where they're not scoring well. It's the shorter ones.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, you develop a pattern. You see where the pattern is. Okay. I see that within, like you said, 40 yards, this is where I'm losing a lot of strokes. And, there are some people, that are real smart, ASS, that want to keep score. So in their head, they're mentally but I used to take students out and I say, okay, don't worry about the scorecard. I'm going to make some notes here. And we go around and I would keep score. I wouldn't tell them I was keeping score, and I'd keep score. And, it didn't happen necessarily the first time, but the second or third time I knew what they could shoot because, we played other rounds before. But what was interesting is when they were not focusing on the numbers, they actually played better because now they were focusing on the shot at hand. Not knowing what their score was going to be made it, and I'm not talking individual because obviously if you're on a par 3, you either got par or you got 4, but keeping the overall score. So they didn't know whether they were going to break 100 or 90 or whatever the case was going to be unless they were a mathematician and keep those numbers in their head. So there was a method to my madness. I wanted them to stop focusing on that. But as to your point, I wanted them to keep the stats because then I wanted to go back and evaluate and say, okay, let's look at your round from a different perspective. Forget about the number, what we scored. I didn't tell them until much later what the score was. I said, I want to see what your stats are. So let's examine this. You hit some pretty good fairways here. So you're pretty good, pretty solid off the tee. But your approach shots, you're not, you only hit, 4 greens in regulation. So your approach shots are not good. And then your recovery shots or your scramble shots were also kind of weak. Putting was not bad, whatever. So you dissect that a little bit. And now it gets them to thinking more strategy, and they're not focusing on the score. And once you do that, the score takes care of itself eventually.
Yep.
If you're focusing on the right pieces, right?
Absolutely. There's no question behind that. So, it's cool that you're talking about that because I develop a scorecard that I give to all my players, and it really tracks the shots they hit from, I call it first shot, second shot, third shots, and then fourth shots, which are the others. So you've got drives, you've got par 3 first shots, you've got your second shots, your thirds, and then they start to see when. And there's no place to total the score up. You're just tracking what you're doing in each one of these columns. So then you can see, you get done and you look and say, man, I had a whole slew of shots that are called third and fourth shots. I said, yeah, that's because, you're struggling around the greens, and so it's just like you're talking about it. You get to track where you're really deficient, and then, you can start to make those, much better. And I think more than anything else, people are going to find that, probably most of the work they need to do is inside like 100 yards. And, if they can get proficient at that, scoring becomes it takes care of itself. Like you said, if you're getting better at hitting shots from, 40, 50, 60 yards and making better putts, the score is going to take care of itself. So it's all about learning, where your deficiencies are and, being able to then, it's not like you got to spend a ton of time, but if you know what they are, you can spend a little more time practicing those areas, and it's just going to make your overall game so much better.
And you're exactly right. And understanding where the weak areas of your game are gives you a purpose when you're up on the driving range and the practice area and you've got something to work on. You can say, okay, now I know where the weak areas that are costing me strokes out in the golf course. I don't care about my score right now. I'm not worried about my handicap. I know that will eventually take care of itself, but I need to work on, these one or two areas particularly. Obviously, I've got to work in all of my game, but particularly there's some areas that my coach and I need to dial in on. So keeping those stats are important, but forget about the score. I mean, if you're 25 plus handicap, or 30, whatever the case is, even a 20 handicap, let's forget about, for the time being, let's forget about the score. Obviously, if you're playing in an event at your course or something, it's the club championship, and you're playing it with a group or what have you. I mean, or a corporate event. I mean, obviously you can't not do that. But the rest of the time, when you're just out with your friends, just say, hey, you know what, guys, let's not keep score. Let's just go out and have some fun. I'm going to make some notes. I'm going to take track of my stats, so I've got that information next time I connect with my pro, and then you've got something to focus on. But when you're not dwelling on your score and you're talking about other things out there, and you don't really care, what the end number is as much as putting your best swing on each shot, suddenly the game becomes less stressful and there's less tension because you're not trying to work to a number. You're really working through a process, and that is becoming a better shot maker, better strategy, whatever the case may be, whatever it is that you're working on. That becomes your focal point. All the while, you're having more fun because you're having better conversation. You're not dwelling on those numbers. So that's why I think sometimes, especially for the less accomplished players, I think not keeping score for a while is a smart way to go. Give yourself a chance to get out there and just have some fun. Because if you're not having fun, what's the point of being out there, right?
No, I agree 100%. I was thinking the other day, and I'm standing at the driving range, and obviously this range is built to, for maximum capacity of, how many range balls they hit is where the revenue drive is, and we all understand that. But I said, looking down here, we've got every bay filled, and I said 75% of these people should be over in the short game area. They shouldn't even be over here if they want to play better. They shouldn't even be over here just banging golf balls. They should be down there in the short. Our short game area should be so packed, but it's not. Hardly anybody's over there using it. And we got one of the best practice facilities in the St. Louis area. And it just baffles me that, they're not over there practicing, and they should be, because that's where their game is going to improve. We got anything from 50 yards on in and anything they can imagine. And so, that place should be packed all the time. But it's not.
I can see, when I look down the range, I have a course not too far from where I am, and I've taken clients there before. It's not one I do all the time, but, and I like to play it myself, and I like to go and work on my game a little bit. And I'll stand, and I like to watch people. So as I'm, hitting some balls and whatever, I'll kind of watch around and keep an eye on people. And I don't bother them. I don't say anything to them unless they, approach me or talk to me. But it's always interesting. I might see 20 guys down the range, let's say as an example, and they're all hitting their shots, doing whatever. And I'll look over, and there's two practice greens. There's one that's more designed for putting. There's actually three putting greens. But one of the putting greens is more, they've got some bunkers around it, and they've got some rough and whatever. So it's more of a chipping and a bunker play, that sort of thing. The other one's a putting, chipping, maybe a little pitching and that. And then there's the other one that's just strictly putting. You can't do anything else on. I can count on one hand on all three of those locations how many players at any given time are there, and I could chop 3 of my fingers off. So that tells you, out of the 20 guys, I might see 1 or 2 that are spending any time, and usually it's just before they're getting ready to hit out in the golf course. They'll go and hit a few putts, and maybe they'll chip. Occasionally I will see somebody there that will spend 20, even 30 minutes working on various parts of their short game. It's almost like a wasted space. because they don't utilize it. And I've said
Yep.
to students that I've brought there many times, I said, they'll say, oh, you know, and I've actually had them where they'll take their stuff up to the range while they're waiting for me, and I say, we're going over here. Oh, well, I just want to hit some balls. I said, no, we're going to go over here. I want you to work on some of these areas, because I said, there'll be plenty of time you can hit all the balls you want afterwards. But I said, this is what we're going to work on today, because I'm looking at your cards, and you guys are struggling in this area. So why do you want to go and sit there working on your driver and, you know, hybrid or whatever when you can't get up and down? So, you know, you have to be, you know, honest with yourself. And if you want to have fun, the whole purpose is, again, I hate to sound like a broken record, is to have fun. And how can you be having fun if you're not working on things that are going to make it more fun? If you're working on things, and if all you want to do, and we've said this many times on the show too, all of us have, if you just want to be a range rat and see how far you can hit the shots and things like that, hey, all the power to you. But if you're going to come to us and say, I want to be a better player and I want to score better, and you're not going to put in the work, you're not going to have fun. And you're just going to get frustrated, and then, you know, you're going to be upset with us because we're not helping you get better, because you're not willing to put in the effort in the areas that need to be, you know, better implemented. Another one I want to throw in, I want to get off. Right, you know what I'm talking about. Play 9 holes instead of 18. There's no rule saying you have to play 18 every time. Play 9 holes. There's some courses will let you even go out and just play 6. Again, mix it up a bit. I think this is a good one as well, right, Pete? I think just to get people to get out of that mindset that they've got to get out there and be out there for 4. Not everybody has, you know, 4.5 to 5 hours every day or every other day. Sometimes you only have a couple of hours. Let's play 9 holes. Your thoughts?
Oh, that's a great idea. You know, I think for most people, it's more efficient to what their lifestyles are now as far as the time goes. And I like the way when you see some of the courses adapting to that, to where they're doing split tees and they're running 9 holes rounds off the back, or they're mixing it up a little bit so they can put the 9 holers in there so they don't affect the flow of the regular play. But yeah, I think it's a great idea to do that, and one particular course is close to me advertises that all the time, and they get a lot of takers for those 9-hole rounds. So yeah, definitely, I think it's a great way to do it. It's a great way to learn. It's a great pace. You know, we've all talked about how slow the rounds have gotten, but yeah, I think advertising and playing just 9 holes is a great way to do it. And a lot of people, you know, they don't get off work till, you know, summertime. They're just not getting off work. You know, it's great to run out and play 9 holes this time of day. There's nobody out there. You know, it's a great way to do it. We used to do that all the time.
You know, when I used to work at the golf course, not, you know, doing the lessons at the time, I was doing some other stuff. And, you know, we obviously had privileges on the course. And I would always play at the end of the day, you know, if I was done at 4:30, I'd go and play 9 holes because there was still plenty of sunlight. I could easily get 9. I could get 18 up, but I'd have to really push it on the last, you know, 3-4 holes. But I could certainly get, you know, 9 holes in, no problem. And I would try to do that every single day. And you were right. I mean, you pretty much had the lay of the land. You know, this particular course had 2 18s and a 9. So there was plenty of holes. And I would just rotate it out. And, you know, there was still some people playing on the course, but nowhere near like, I mean, everybody comes out in the morning and, you know, even midday. But, you know, 4:30 and beyond, it really relaxes. Everybody's in the clubhouse or they've moved on. So you pretty much had your pick of where you wanted to play, right? So, you know,
I totally
agree. I think that's a good way to handle it. This one, and I want to get your thoughts on as well, and this I kind of alluded to it a little bit in my last comments, but I think another thing, too, again, helps to sort of mix it up, and that is play at a different time of day if you can. So instead of always getting morning tee times, maybe play in the afternoon. What do you think?
Oh, yeah, great way to do it. You know, the golf course is different in the afternoon than it is in the morning. So you get to see a different condition, you know, whether the greens have dried out or what have you. So, yeah, definitely, you know, most places there's not much wind in the morning. There's more wind in the afternoon. So, yeah, by changing around what you're doing, it's just a great way to experience a different type of golf from what you're normally used to. So yeah, I would encourage that like crazy to do that. Yeah, definitely a more fun point. I always enjoyed playing in the mornings, in the summertime because it wasn't so friggin' hot. So it was really hot in the afternoons. But I still enjoyed those afternoon rounds because the golf course played so differently in the afternoon than it did in the morning. And so it was just another challenge to go tackle. So, yeah, I highly recommend that.
Well, and that's where you can sort of combine the last two, playing at a different time and just playing 9 holes. So you're not, obviously I know, especially here in the South, it can get pretty steamy. And again, but playing a different time of the day. I mean, we had an older member at the course, a woman who was probably mid to late 60s. And now she liked playing in the morning. She'd be out there at 5:30. As soon as the sun, crest over the horizon, she was out there. And she'd just play 9 holes. And she, didn't take a cart. She had a pull cart. Actually, she had her own pull carts, the older style. And she just pulled out and played 9 holes every day. And she said one of the reasons she did that and went out so early is, one, there was nobody out there. So she could just take her time, relax, have fun, enjoy it. The dew was on the ground. And, usually before all of the equipment went out, before we got there and the mowers went out and all that kind of stuff, is in our neck of the woods, it was, a wooded area. There was a lake nearby. There was always deer, rabbits or whatever on the golf course. So she got, her own little zoo,
absolutely,
which you don't see in the middle of the day. So she just loved it. And every once in a while, she would play sometimes late in the day, too, for the same reasons, because, again, once everybody starts to leave and there's only a handful of people, and she lived right across the street, so she could literally walk across. Her house was right across the street from the entrance of the golf course. So she could walk across the street, come in with a pull cart. Yeah.
Great.
I used to, talk with her when I get there in the morning. She'd be just coming into the clubhouse when we were getting ready to head out. And I'd be still having, maybe breakfast or morning coffee, and she would come in and always say hi. Really nice woman. And, I just said, man, you're out there every day. And she just said, what better way to spend an hour and a half or so, 2 hours in the morning to see, all the wildlife and beautiful conditions. And I don't have to worry about interfering in anybody else's game, and nobody's bothering my game. And she said, I just like her husband had, passed away some years earlier. And so she was on her own, and they used to do it together. They actually used to do that together, and she just carried on the tradition. So, that's another way. Play at a different time of the day, and maybe just play 9 holes, as I said earlier.
I totally agree. So, I would.
It's all.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say it's important to mix it up. Is what I was going to say, but go ahead and what you were going to say.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We tried to mix it up as often as we could, just to make it more interesting, just different, do something different. Even with the tournaments we ran, they never knew what we were going to come up with. We came up with some of the goofiest scoring systems you could ever imagine, and at the start we'd think, I don't know if it's going to go over very well, and then when they all finished, they thought, man, that was fun. It was challenging because it was so different from what we're normally used to doing. And, you look at the scoreboard and, the 185 is the low score because of the way we set it up to, you get X points for this and so many of this for that. And, so we would just challenge them all the time to do different things. Because like you said, those holiday tournaments, you keep doing the same scramble over and over and over again. Yeah, they can get a little bit boring, I think, for some of them. But if we change up the scoring system and now everybody has to be involved. So, sometimes in a scramble, they didn't use one of my shots the whole time. We said, nope, you're going to use your shots now because the way you're scoring, everybody has to hit. So I think they have a lot more fun that way.
Well, it's that old saying, variety is the spice of life. And I think that you have to be willing to look at it, and as I look at this list and, sort of recap, playing with just 5 clubs, and you can have a different number. Maybe it might be 6 clubs, but 5 clubs is a good number. It's number one. It's lighter, to carry around. Moving up to the forward tees makes it again a little bit different. Gives you a little bit more advantage in some ways, or at least brings you back to a game that maybe you were once familiar with. That sort of fallen by the wayside. Mixing up your foursome is another way that we talked about. Don't keep score. You don't always have to write down the score, but certainly by all means I recommend keeping your stats and that information because that's going to be valuable for you. As you just pointed out, playing an alternate format is a good way as well to keep it mixed and make it interesting. 9 holes instead of 18. Some courses will even let you just play 6 holes if that's all you can squeeze in. Different time of the day. Again, just to keep things fresh, again, in the morning, a lot of times there might be some dew on the ground. The sun's just rising up, and usually not much breeze. Play in the afternoon. It's a little hotter, but drier course, different conditions. So you're actually mimicking different conditions that you might be faced with in a tournament, because it's not always going to be. You may not always get the early morning tee time. You might be the guy that's coming out just before lunch, if you're playing in a club championship or something along that line. So, whatever the case may be. So, conditions are going to be a little bit different. The last one, and this is really, believe it or not, I think a good way to have fun as well. And I'll explain what I mean here in a second, and then I'm going to let you have the final thoughts on it. And that is take a lesson. You have to learn to improve your golf game, and you need to work with somebody that can help you. But what you can do, and you can have this conversation with your teaching professional or your coach, is say, I need to improve. Here are some of the ways I've discovered over the years. Maybe you're a new beginning golfer and you haven't played very much, so it's sort of open to interpretation, let's say. But you can insist and say, let's find some ways to make it fun, interesting. Let's challenge me. You help make up some of what needs to go on, and that can help to make it a little bit more fun. If you just get into a rut routine where the coach saying, okay, here's what you need to do, and you need to do that, and you're just sort of falling through the grind, that sometimes is not fun for the students. So the coaches have to be mindful of that. So I want to get your thoughts on that. How can we, what are some other suggestions that maybe you can think of as coaches and or even as students that we can do to make the lesson tee a little bit more interesting as well?
I think first and foremost, and it's my mantra, you got to keep it simple. Keep the complication out of it. I know the technology and everything that's going on today and 3D and all the different, things that they can do. You can really throw a lot of stats at somebody or a lot of numbers at somebody. But in the end, you want to keep it as simple as possible and also make sure they have a roadmap to what they're going to practice. I think that more than anything else really alleviates a lot of the pressure because all the players I have, they know exactly what to do when they go practice because we hammer that out during the lessons. I make sure they understand it. This is how I want you to practice this particular item, and this is what I want you to do here. So every time they go to practice, they definitely have an exact thing for what they're going to do for the purpose of the practice they're doing, whether that's putting, chipping, pitching, bunker play, any of the short game shots, all into the full swing. And that's all broken down into, making sure that they understand, what's going on. But most importantly, I want them to make sure that they don't get too complicated, don't put too much pressure on yourself, and, make sure you're having some fun doing it because I try to break the practice up so it is more fun because they're switching around doing different things as they practice and hit balls. And it's not to take away from somebody who's going to be pretty serious and really wants to improve their game. I still think, even with the tour guys I have, we still keep it simple and fun. It's a grind for everybody, at times. But I think more than anything else, if they have a clear picture of what they're trying to do and a success pattern to get there, I think it's going to be a lot more fun. And I think they're going to have a greater time practicing when they do practice. And I think because of that, they'll practice more often. And so they'll get a lot better. So I think as coaches, we have to try to keep it as simple as we possibly can and understand that, they're coming to us and most of the stuff we know is second nature. It's all in our heads and we've been doing this a long, long time and they haven't. So, for them to learn something new, we have to step back a little bit and say, hey, wait a minute. We were in their shoes at one time. So we have to understand that they're learning something new and it's going to take a little time. But let's not get the frustration level out. Let's explain to them, here's what you're going to do. This is what it's going to take. Here's a roadmap for what you're going to do and to make it a lot more fun as they practice to break it up a bit. And, I've always said, to me, it makes it a lot more fun when you just keep it as simple as you possibly can.
Well said. And just to add real quick to this, I took a lot of tips from teachers that I had in school when I first started my golfing career. And one of the things that stood out to me is, I didn't really have, well, I shouldn't say didn't have any, but I didn't have what I would classify as a bad teacher. I don't think any teachers are bad. Some are more proficient than others. Some are more, diligent and thorough and things. So they weren't really, I don't want to use the term that they were bad teachers. But there were some teachers that stuck out. And the ones that stuck out to me are the ones that I learned from the most, what I got most out of. And it wasn't because the topic was better or necessarily more interesting. It's that they intertwined the lessons with some fun. So as an example, there was a time when we, really had to buckle down and learn whatever the lesson was. But then there would be classes that we would come in and there was almost zero pressure. There was no, we didn't get in, okay, well, you got to open up to chapter this, that, and the other. They would always find creative ways to make the class fun. So it might be even going outside. Sometimes, our class would go outside and we would, form a group under, a tree on the school grounds. And we would sit down there and just have almost like a conversation. And those teachers, I took away more. As I look back, I had favorite teachers, and that's why. It's because they made learning more fun, more interesting. And those are just, a couple of very small examples. And the ones that sort of, went to the grindstone all the time, it became so daunting and just monotonous and boring, and I just never, and it's almost like when you're listening to somebody speak and your eyes start glazing over. That's what would happen with a lot of students. And I know they meant well, and it's not. So as a golf professional, I tried to do the same thing. There was a time that my students needed to buckle down and needed to, get serious about their game. But then I would say, let's have some fun. Let's forget about, working on this over here today. Let's go out and play, 4 or 5 holes, or let's play 9 or what have you. And let's forget about trying to focus on the numbers. Let's just put everything together and let's just go out and play and have some fun. What will be, what will be. And I think that they appreciated that because it gave them an opportunity to have a tension-free visit. They would still learn, and they could still ask questions if they had questions. Hey, I didn't hit that shot very well. Can you? And I wouldn't get too in depth, but I would say, remember the lesson such and such. Remember how I said you had to keep, that arm in certain position or whatever. We would talk about that, but it would be very brief. I didn't want to get into a full-blown lesson there. I wanted them just to go out and have fun so that when they went home, then they were excited about coming back. See what I mean? Yeah,
I agree 100%. Yeah. It's funny because this particular week, and this is the second time this happened, I had a gentleman that came in, asked him how his day was, terrible day at work, just nothing went right. We started to hit some balls, and that wasn't going right either. And I said, hey, look, put your club back in your bag. I said, put your bag over in the corner. I said, follow me. So we went around the corner to the bar, and I said, what do you want to drink? So he ordered a beer. I got a beer, and we sat out in the patio and just had a beer instead. And when we got finished, he said, this is the best golf lesson I've ever had. It's exactly what I needed. So sometimes it's not even about hitting golf balls.
Yep.
It's just about understanding your person that's in front of you and what's the best way to handle that situation for that time.
Exactly. And that was a really smart thing to do for 2 reasons. One, it shows, hey, we're human too. We recognize that everybody has good and bad days. But when you're faced with a situation, when you have a student that comes in that you can read the room and that student has had a bad day, maybe it's a challenge at work, maybe you've got an early morning lesson, maybe they had a disagreement with their spouse, so they've already started their day. Well, they're not going to absorb what you're going to teach them anyways. Mm-hmm. More often than not, they're thinking about that lost account, or they're thinking about the argument they had with their spouse in the morning, or their children, whatever the case may be. So they're not going to be receptive to what it is that you're really going to talk about. So sometimes you just need to break the barriers and say, you know what, we're not going to focus on anything that really takes a lot of, let's just go and, like you said, let's sit up the bar, let's have a beer, let's just, have a fireside chat, as it were, and just, have a good time, and we'll focus on the lessons next time.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
All right. Well, Pete, we managed to scrape through the hour together, and always appreciate it. And sorry that for those of you that tune in, we're maybe hoping to hear John. Unfortunately, as I anticipated, he was probably busy out on the golf course or other things, so not to worry. We will get him the next time. But Pete, as always, thank you very much for coming on Coach's Corner tonight. I appreciate it. And if you want to just take a moment and let the folks know how the best way they can reach out if they want to get in touch with you and maybe they're connect for some lessons, or maybe just have a chat with you and see how you can help their game and how to make golf a little bit more fun again for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's always a great time, Ted. Thanks for having me on. They can reach me at PeteBuchananGolf.com. All my contact information is out there. And as you just said, drop me a line and let's just start a conversation. Let me know where your golf game is at. Let me know what you're trying to do. And we can definitely put something together to move your golf game along to where you need it to be. So, but yeah, thanks again, Ted. It's always a great time.
Always a pleasure, Pete. You have a great rest of your evening and weekend, and I'll see you next time here on the Coach's Corner panel here on Golf Talk Live. Thanks, my friend.
You bet. All right, you bet. Thanks.
All right, as I see my special guests, my featured guests for the evening are already lining up here in queue, but before I bring them on, we're going to take a quick message from one of our sponsors here on Golf Talk Live.
When it comes to golf, there are two topics that consistently come up: more distance and more energy. But hey, what if you could achieve both? Introducing Victory's carbon fiber insoles, the revolutionary performance insoles designed specifically to help golfers hit longer. Using patented carbon fiber technology, VKs do more than support your feet. Many golfers see a 1 to 2 mile per hour increase in club head speed just by adding Victory insoles to their shoes. So if you want to up your game and feel better after a long day on the course, choose Victory's carbon fiber insoles. Visit Victory.com, that's VKTRY.com, and use code GT20 for 20% off today. This offer is exclusive for listeners of this podcast. Again, visit Victory.com and use code GT20 for 20% off. Order today to start feeling the difference on your next round.
All right, welcome back to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and I'm very excited to have back. I've got actually 3 guests joining me tonight. 2 have been on the show a number of times over the years, and a new guest that's going to be joining them for tonight's conversation. Let me tell you just a little bit about each, and then I'm going to bring them on the show. First up is Peggy Rhodes-White, and then joining her is her daughter, Tiffany White, and then a good friend of theirs, Dr. Carl Sales, all from the Ted Rhodes Foundation. Let me tell you just, again, very briefly about all of them. Peggy is the daughter of golfing pioneer Ted Rhodes, and she founded the Ted Rhodes Foundation in 1994, which is a nonprofit foundation dedicated to his legacy. Her daughter, Tiffany, who is also granddaughter of Ted Rhodes, is a multi-talented entrepreneur running various companies and serving as the president of the Ted Rhodes Foundation. And joining them is Dr. Carl Sales. He's the president of Indiana Sports Management and is a key member of the Ted Rhodes Foundation's advisory board. So please welcome my very special guests this evening, Peggy Rhodes-White, Tiffany White, and Dr. Carl Sales. Good evening, all, and welcome to Golf Talk Live.
Good evening, Ted.
Good evening. This is Gary Sales.
Gary, thank you.
Gary Sales. It's Gary Sales, Ted.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Now, is Tiffany on here too?
I am.
Okay, there you are. I recognize Peggy's voice, but I hadn't heard your voice yet. Well, welcome and thank you for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. It's a pleasure, Peggy and Tiffany. Of course, you guys have been on here many times, and Dr. Sales, thank you for joining us this evening as well, and I appreciate all of you guys coming on the show. So I want to start tonight's discussion with just a very brief recap, and then I've got some specific questions for each of you, and you're all welcome, of course, to add to or in the mix with any of the questions added, you're all welcome to chime in as well. But Peggy, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk about your father, Teddy Rhodes, just to let the listeners, for some of the new listeners that maybe haven't heard or aren't familiar with him, who Teddy Rhodes was.
Ted Rhodes developed an interest in golf by being a caddy in the Bellevue Country Club in Nashville. He expressed an interest at that time at 12 years old. Can you believe it? And he just did such a great job at it. They decided to give him a set of old golf clubs. I'm going to let Tiffany talk a little bit more about him moving forward. I'm just going to start the early years, how he, got involved and why golf was such an important part of his life. But he developed an interest by caddying, and the people at the country club, it was the Bellevue Country Club in Nashville, saw him and thought, oh, my God, he's doing such a great job. They gave him a set of golf clubs, and he started practicing actually with the clothes hanger, the swing. And he did that, and then he, from that point on, he just started doing more with golf. He was a caddy, actually, is how he started. And beyond that, there's so much more to tell to this story, but that's how he developed the interest. He had a strong passion to be the best that he could be, and he was just really focused and determined to be the best golfer in the world. And, of course, he actually accomplished that, so I'm really excited about that. So I've actually turned the running of the day-to-day golf tournament and the history and legacy over to Tiffany. She's doing all that now, so I'm going to let her take it from
So Tiffany, I'm going to ask you sort of two questions in one. Maybe you can talk a little bit about why golf was so important to your grandfather, obviously, why it was important to him, and what do you think were his takeaways from the game? What was it about the game that, and ladies, from being involved in golf, that once you kind of get bitten by the golf bug, it never seems to go away. So was he bitten by the golf bug, do you think? Why was it so important to him, and what were the takeaways from the game, do you think, Tiffany, that he got?
I'm going to help out a little bit with that question. I think he was bitten by the game, and it's just my opinion that he was bitten because having been a caddy and observing the golfers playing golf, he thought, wow, this is something that I could do. So I think that was really how he developed an interest and why it was so important and exciting for him. He just thought he'd give it a try.
And then the other thing, too, I would add is he received great feedback from the people that he caddied for, that, you can actually do this, play this game as well. So I think that really got him into it, and he just started to love it and enjoy it. And, that really became his career, being a golfer. And in terms of the takeaways, I think one of the main takeaways is that, he never let anything stop him from doing it. So although he had all of these obstacles playing the great game of golf at the time frame that he was playing, especially given the Caucasian-only rule, he did not let that discourage him or say, some people would have given up and say, what, if they don't want me here, I don't want to be here. But he was so passionate about golf, Ted, that he said, what, I'm going to hang in here with this. I know there's challenges, but I'm going to have a great attitude. I am going to do well. And although he had limited funds, he always looked great. And so he had, the complete package when he was on the golf course. And the takeaways, I think, for all of us is, there's nothing that you cannot do. If individuals such as my grandfather could go through the challenges that they went through at that time with no technology, no resources whatsoever, then there's nothing that should stop us from doing anything. And having the right attitude is important because, Ted, that's when we meet people, that's what they say, that he always had a great attitude, although people treated him negatively.
Right.
I also want to say that Ted, the people that he caddied for were very impressed with how he was able to, pick up the game, practice, and he just thought, wow, this is something that I can do. And so I think that's another reason as well.
Just, Peggy, real quick, if you don't mind, and then I want to make a couple of points on what Tiffany just said, just so that the listeners get an idea. What was the timeline? Like, what was the years from when he sort of first got introduced to the game to obviously when he passed away. So just so that people have an idea, because we're obviously talking many years ago. This is not something that just happened recently. So what was the timeline roughly?
Well, actually, believe it or not, he was 12 years old when he started, and he passed away, made his transition in 1959. Oh, 69, okay. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, I just wanted the audience just to kind of get a flavor of the timeline that we're talking about. So this is, back prior to the 60s, and obviously the game was a much different. And I want to touch on something that was really interesting because I agree. You Tiffany, you made a point that he looked good, and not just swinging the golf club and playing the game, but he looked good out there. And I remember one of the first times that you both had come on the show. And, I always like to try to do a little homework in that. And I was looking at some of the old photos. We didn't have smartphones and iPhones back then where you could just snap and take selfies and all that back in those days. So, you didn't have the myriad of thousands of photos like you do today. But any of the photos that I ever saw of, Peggy, your dad, and Tiffany, your grandfather, respectively, I mean, he was styling. He looked good out on the golf course. Better than some of the ones that today. Would you not agree with that? I mean, he had a presence.
Yeah, he had a strong presence. He was a great height too, so I feel like the clothes hit him the way they were supposed to. And we were so excited when the European writer of GQ had my grandfather as one of the top 10 world's best dressed golfers in the world. Like, that was huge for us because there were a lot of people that were snazzy dressers, but to have my grandfather in that list when he had minimal resources at that particular time is very, very exciting for us.
Right, exactly. Oh, for sure. I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No, I just want to say, too, in terms of the dress, he was one of the first golfers to wear knickers on the golf course, and he had all color golf outfits. When he passed away, he had pink shoes, pink golf outfits, yellow, all the popular, vivid colors he enjoyed. People telling him, I think it made him feel really special, and they told him how great he looked. And the story that was told to me is he went out one day and played 18 holes of golf in all white, and he was so impressed when he came back he didn't have a speck of dirt on him.
I know. I remember seeing that photo. I was thinking the same photo when you were talking. I was thinking that was amazing. And, he brought really a style to the game when it really didn't have a style. When you look back at you know what I'm talking about. When you look back at the game during that time frame, it was a very, and I'll be honest, I mean, obviously I wasn't there I wasn't born until 64, but when I look back at the old pictures, it was a very bland, monotone colors, not really, and it wasn't until a little bit later into the later 60s and 70s when you started to see a little bit more fashion for it. But yeah, I mean, Teddy Rhodes brought a lot of style in how he dressed and how he presented himself in the golf course. And for him to go out and play an all white outfit and not come back with a single grass stain or dirt, from hitting the golf ball, that's pretty impressive. Even in the best of times, that's pretty impressive. So I got to give him a shout out for that. So I want to fast forward and Dr. Sales, I promise I'm going to come to you in just a moment. I have one more quick question for the two ladies here, and then I'll skip down to you. Peggy, I want you to talk.
Just conversation, man. I'm listening and doing research.
Well, there you go. I hear you. I got to try to time it out though, because I know Peggy can talk a lot, so I gotta make sure I get the rest of you in as well.
I'm taking a rest tonight. I'm letting Tiffany do most.
Yeah, I know. I'm just teasing you. What I was going to ask you both, it's the same question, but I want you to just talk about it, obviously in your own words. Peggy, you're first, obviously, and then Tiffany. How did he influence your life? Not so much from golf, but how, with what he did, with what his legacy has brought, what did it mean for you, and how did it influence your life moving forward? How did it make you, Tiffany? And obviously, Tiffany, I know your mother, Peggy, obviously has been a huge influence. So I know there's that there as well, but you are obviously influenced by your grandfather. So Peggy, how did your dad influence your life today to make you who you are, and how did Tiffany, your grandfather, influence you?
Oh, that's a loaded question. I'm just thinking about that. Well, actually,
you want Tiffany to go first?
Yeah, let Tiffany go first, and I'm making notes here.
All right, Tiffany, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I would say my grandfather influenced me to, how can I say this, to know that, there's nothing that I cannot do. And I think about, some of the challenges that I've had in the past, which seem minute compared to the things that he had to face over the course of his career. So I think one thing was having a great attitude at all times, despite the situation, having a great attitude visibly and being positive. So despite having challenges, still being positive. That's one key piece. I am a breast cancer survivor, and that was the part that facilitated my healing, was being positive about everybody else looks at it negative. That's, this is a temporary situation. So that's one of those lessons that I learned from my grandfather, is that you can conquer any situation, but it's all in how you handle it. Also, I learned that, you need to be dressed fabulously at all times. You never know who's going to see you. You have a reputation, and I carried that out through my corporate career in financial services, and even, through my entrepreneurial efforts. You don't need a ton of money to look great. And it's all about overall impression and things of that nature. So I would say those are two of the things that really carry with me. And Ted, as I think about a lot of the things that he faced, it almost brings me to tears because, although we're so many years later, there's still challenges that are still out there in this day and age. But it just goes to show that, we can conquer anything with the right attitude, being the best at what you can be, and, being able to show people that you are great and deserve to be in a space.
Okay, now, Ted, I'm ready.
Well, now, did I not tell you Peggy's going to talk a lot? So I'm going to mute my mic, and Peggy, you go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, he taught me perseverance, not taking no for an answer, never giving up. And the one thing about me is that my background is pharmaceutical sales. I was a sales rep, and I worked for Johnson & Johnson, and I was the only African-American female at that time. And I did everything I could, having learned from my father, to not give up, to make sure I was the best. I was the number one salesperson in the country at one time during my career. And he taught me that, when people say no, that's just an opportunity for you to say, yes, I can do this. Because even though he faced a lot of obstacles in his life, he never was bitter about it. He was hurt, but he wasn't bitter, and just made him even more assertive and more determined to be the best that he could be. So I think that that's what I learned from him.
Well said. And, when I look at your bios, and the reason I didn't read everything out for you two, because you've been on so many times, and I know that the tuning in tonight are familiar with your stories. But as you pointed out, Peggy, I mean, you were, you've worked for several Fortune 500 companies, Johnson & Johnson, as you mentioned, and Becton Dixon. And, you had to be on top of your game. You're obviously a graduate. You attended Tennessee University. So obviously well educated, as is your daughter, who received her Bachelor of Arts degree in Business Admin from Clark Atlantic University, and then has gone on. Tiffany, as you mentioned, about so many entrepreneurial opportunities, and that's in addition to being the current president of the Ted Rhodes Foundation. So you've got a lot of things and accomplishments that you've had. And the one takeaway that I think that I would add. And you both kind of alluded to this, but you didn't actually come out and say it, but I'm going to say it on your behalf, is I think he gave both of you, through his legacy, an incredible work ethic. And that's something, unfortunately, that is missing today a lot with a lot of younger kids coming through. And I know we're none of us are spring chickens anymore, but, he obviously instilled, first and foremost, Peggy, with you being his daughter. And then obviously, again, I know you've done a lot with Tiffany as well, but I think his legacy has really done that for both of you, is given you a taste of no matter what adversities you may be challenged with throughout your life, that is no excuse to go through life feeling that you're not good enough or you're not able to. If you put your mind to something, you can accomplish many, many things, and you both have done that very well. And one last thing I was going to say, Tiffany, you mentioned about, always looking your best, even if you didn't have a lot. You never know who you're going to bump into at the PGA show. So that's where we bumped into one another. So, and you gals were styling it there as well, as you always do. I was so excited to bump into you this last January. Dr. Sales, I'm going to come to you now and give you a chance to speak now that we've managed to quiet Peggy up a little bit and get some room left in tonight's show. You've obviously enjoyed a prominent career as well. Obviously, you are an adjunct professor that's dealing with African American and African diaspora studies at Indiana University, as well as being part of the advisory board for Ted Rhodes Foundation. I hope I pronounced that word right. I had to phonetically put it out because I wasn't sure how it was pronounced. But you've had a very interesting and fulfilling career. What did you want? Before I get what you've taken away from it thus far, why did you want to be a part of the foundation? What was it about Teddy Rhodes' story that spoke to you, and what does it mean to you to be a part of keeping his legacy alive?
A class in Afro-American Studies at Indiana University, and it is a class on Black sports history. Years ago, when I developed this class, doing the research, and me being a golfer, naturally I was going to include a segment on African-American history in golf along with all of the other sports. And I came across this name that I had never heard of, Ted Rhodes. And the more I researched it, the more I was drawn to his story, okay? And while I was researching it, I learned about the Ted Rhodes tournament in Nashville and, the Ted Rhodes golf course and things like that, and started, doing a deep dive. And I reached out to Peggy and Tiffany, played their tournament, and had pictures taken, and I included those pictures in my lecture notes to do Ted Rhodes' legacy. And for a long time, that was pretty much it. But when I retired from the university 3 years ago, and they asked me to stay on as an adjunct to teach that Black sports history class, I felt a disconnect. And I needed to continue writing. I've got a number of publications and all this kind of stuff. So I don't want to write anymore. I want to do a film. So my film crew and we're currently shooting a documentary film on Ted Rhodes' journey. The title of the film is, listen to this, Rags, the Ted Rhodes Story. And so now, with the research, I've had an opportunity to speak with a lot of old legends, Jim Dent, Jim Thorpe,
right?
And his story is coming alive, and there are lots of things that have happened that are far-reaching. That Ted Rhodes was, the origins. If Ted Rhodes, if Lee Elder and Charlie Sifford and all these guys whose names we're familiar with, integrated sports, it was Ted Rhodes, their coach, who unlocked that door. I don't think he got the credit that he deserved. I don't think he got the recognition that he deserved. And this was just my own personal opinion. I kept it to myself. But wow, I have an opportunity now to do something about it. So we've raised the money we need to do our trailer. We're filming the trailer now. And we're going to, hopefully produce the film by next year and release it to, and hope that it's picked up by Netflix or Paramount or one of these cable companies. But I was just taken by Ted Rhodes' story. It just touched my heart. And, Peggy and Tiffany can tell you, I just was compelled to do something about it. And I've been interviewing them and asking Gugobs the questions. And ladies, I'm not done. Okay. because every time I talk to them, I learn something new, and then it's just a matter of pairing it into a 60-minute documentary.
Well, I can say for certain. Yeah, I can say for certainty, Dr. Sales, that when that becomes available and you're ready to do your launch, I would love for you to come back. And obviously, if you'd like to have the ladies join you when you're ready to do your launch, I would love to have you come back and present that a little more effectively. Obviously, when it's ready, and that, I mean, obviously you don't have all the details right now on my show, so you're welcome to come back ahead of time so we can help promote that and get the word out. So
that would
keep
be
that
great.
in the back of. I'm happy to do that. Let me just say real quickly, and then I want to get back because I can talk too, so I got to be careful. I want to give you guys as much opportunities. One of the first times, it's been many years, I've been doing these broadcasts now for 12 years, and Peggy, I think, came on by herself the very first time, and then I think after that, Tiffany, you joined her, and I've tried to have them back every year. I think there were years that for one reason or other, scheduling and whatnot, but they didn't come. They weren't able to come on. But I've tried to have them on almost every season because I just think they really epitomize, not just because of the hard work that they do, but they obviously have a love of Ted Rhodes and what he has done. And you mentioned also some other names, Charlie Sifford, Lee Elder, and of course Tiger Woods, and so many others.
Tiger Woods.
In that community that really owe a lot of really a debt, if you will, to Ted Rhodes, because he was the pioneer. I mean, when you look at the timeline and you look at what he was able to do, and the fact that he did it with, and again, I think Tiffany, you had said that, obviously it wasn't that he didn't get angry. He was very saddened, given those times, how things were. And there's still, as you said, much work to be done. But we're moving in, slowly but surely, but we're moving in the right direction. But he did so much to break barriers for these people. And they had their own challenges too, don't get me wrong. But if it wasn't for Teddy Rhodes, they would not have gotten to the level that they did. And certainly not Mr. Woods, because he owes a lot to all of those previously, Charlie and Lee Elder as well, but particularly to Teddy Rhodes. So I think it's great that they are doing that. I got another question for you, Dr. Sales, real quick, and then I'm going to go back to the ladies here for a second. What would you like to see happen from your perspective moving forward with the work you and many others are doing at the foundation? What would you like? And we're going to get into some of the specifics with Tiffany and Peggy about what the foundation actually does and how it's moving the needle forward. But what would you like to see happen as it progresses and moves forward, and how do you feel you can best serve that?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I just got back from Pinehurst. We did a shoot down there, and I visited the World Golf Hall of Fame. Do I need to say any more? Okay.
Right.
Unfortunately, current qualifications, he doesn't qualify because you have to win a major and you got to do all this other stuff. But I'm hoping that we could impress the board to put him in the hall posthumously. Also, I'd like the film to tell his story and and for it to stay out there and for people to enjoy it, to provide some of the unknown details that maybe even Peggy and Tiffany don't know that have been told to me by other people, and we're going to include that in the film. Just some stories about just how good he was, just how good his swing was, how he mentored these young kids that tried to beat him, but they were in his face trying to beat him, but they couldn't, and then how he started out, he goes to a park, digs a hole, puts a tomato can in there, and he's playing to this tomato can. Stories like this just need to be told because he overcame obstacles. I'm going to provide the details of what those obstacles actually were.
For a number of reasons. Obviously, first and foremost, I think he needs to be elevated to a different status than what he has been, because you're right, that his story has not been told. But the reason why I say that, for obviously reasons, but for another reason, I've had the pleasure of interviewing a number of up-and-coming rising stars in golf. And moving him aside for just a second, it's amazing how many of them, other than maybe one or two names, have very little understanding of the history of the game. they've heard of Nicholas,
Yep.
they've heard of Palmer and Nancy Lopez for the ladies and Annika Sorenstam and that, but they really have no understanding. And I think it's important that all of those folks, their traditions carry on as well in with the younger generation, but also somebody like Teddy Rhodes, who was a pioneer in his community. Also, that story needs to be told. And the people playing in today's game, they're on the golf course, they're hitting golf shots and so forth, and that's fantastic. But they need to understand where their roots began in golf and how they got where they are today. And if not for Teddy Rhodes, that opportunity may not be for them today. So having said that, and I'll start with Tiffany and Peggy, if you want to jump in, that's fine. The Ted Rhodes Foundation obviously began as a way initially of really honoring your grandfather's legacy, but it's become so much more over the years. How has the foundation impacted future generations, and in what way, Tiffany?
Great question, Ted. One of the key things that we have done is introduce the game of golf to youth in the urban areas. It was very important to us to obviously keep my grandfather's legacy alive, but part of that legacy is getting more people that look like him introduced to the game, playing the game, working in the golf industry, being exposed to golf. And so that's one of our key focuses, is to introduce the game. So we've done golf clinics for some Chicago public school system students to get them to the golf course and get them excited about it. We've also have had meetings to do some of that in Nashville as well. And then we've also given youth the opportunity to compete, because we partner with junior golf programs such as the First Tee programs in Chicago, Tennessee, and our new partnership is Jacksonville, Florida. And what we found is, they learn the golf skills, which is fantastic, but may not have any competitive playing experience. So we said we can help fill that void to give them experience playing. So we've already had 2 junior golf tournaments this summer. July 20th, we had the tournament in Nashville, partnered with First Tee of Tennessee. And then this past Saturday, we had a junior golf tournament here in Chicago and partnered with the First Tee chapter in Chicago. And believe it or not, Ted and Gary, many of those kids had never competed. And so there were a lot of first-timers. And so we want to be able to give them that experience, because by doing that, they may say, oh, I like this. I think I want to keep going with golf and perhaps be on a golf team at a HBCU, or I want to continue my golf career. And so many of them were just so excited to be able to compete. It was a little scary for them, but it was great competition. We had an announcer, so they got to see what it is. So that's one aspect of it, Ted, is to introduce the game to golf, the game of golf, to our youth in the urban areas like Chicago, Nashville, where they just have not necessarily been exposed to it, and get them excited, but then also help support them. And so that's why we have focused on helping the historically black colleges golf programs stay alive by providing financial support to those programs, because the HBCU schools have limited resources compared to some of the other schools. And so that was another point that we wanted to fill, is to be an outside organization to provide funding for travel, for uniforms, for things of that nature. We didn't want that to be a hindrance. And so that's really what we've been focused on, is expanding our junior golf initiatives and taking this junior golf tour on the road. We've got 3 cities this year looking on taking on the road, but also, Ted, educating them. To your point, there are a lot of people that play golf, people that even play at the Ted Rhodes golf course, that know nothing about Ted Rhodes or any of the golf pioneers. So that's a component that we add to it, is to educate them on the history of how these individuals played a pivotal role in the golf industry, and we wouldn't be where we are without them. And then also we said we need to give them some professional development and teach them effective communication and leadership skills through our Toastmasters youth leadership program, so that when they're on the golf course, they can communicate with people. Somebody may be there that works at a company where they could be an intern, or have a great opportunity for a scholarship. So we want them to also be able to communicate effectively. So we've been focusing our efforts on those areas. One thing also I want to mention in terms of, my grandfather being known more broadly, we have submitted his name several times to the PGA Hall of Fame, and, he has not been accepted every year. But you know what? We're not going to let that stop us. The downside is that he's not living currently, and so, I guess he's competing against people that are here. But we're not going to let that stop us. We're going to continue to submit his information, as we didn't stop with getting him posthumous membership into the PGA. So that's that fortitude. Even though, like I said, I got that letter. I was disappointed to get that letter from the PGA Hall of Fame saying that he was not selected last year. But I'm not going to I'm going to keep submitting his name, because I think given the work that he did and the impact, he deserves to be honored and put into the PGA Hall of Fame.
I agree.
Well said.
Also, I wanted to
Dr. Sales, go ahead. You want to add it?
Yeah, that's awesome. I did not know that you guys were doing that. We're going to have follow-ups. That's awesome, okay?
Yeah.
And that
So
the movie as well.
Yeah, we're going to keep pushing it. My mom wants to say something.
I just want to add to that also, before Tiffany started to assist, because she was in school during the time, I really fought hard to get him into the Tennessee Golf Hall of Fame, and I did. So I'm really excited about that, because believe it or not, he wasn't even in the Tennessee Golf Hall of Fame, which I thought was just ridiculous. The golf course named after him. He's not in the Tennessee Golf Hall of Fame, so I was able, along with, a couple of other people, to make sure he was inducted into the Tennessee Golf Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I remember, Peggy, you talking about that on a previous show, mentioning about that, and you're exactly right. I think it's important, and I think it's also, and I don't know, I want to put some thought into this, because I think, really, if you've gone multiple times to the same organization, maybe it's time that from a petition standpoint, that maybe that needs to, reach out not just to, the black community, but also to the golfing community and say, hey, this gentleman needs, because if you think about, and I'm going to take a step outside of golf for a second, but if you look at the music industry, there have been many, many artists who should have been in the Hall of Fame, never have to this date, and people are scratching their head, and they'll see somebody else in there and saying, well, wait a minute, this guy wrote 2 songs and he's in the Hall. Yeah. So, maybe, you don't understand what I'm talking about. So maybe a different approach, maybe, from a petition standpoint, saying, hey, this gentleman has a legacy that needs to be shared. And even though he doesn't meet all of the typical criteria, maybe they need to rework and create another division of it and say, hey, these are maybe guys that didn't meet the typical criteria, but nevertheless, we want to include them because they have done so much for the game in whatever capacity. So I think that may be something. So I want to put some thought, and I'm going to reach out to you, Peggy and Tiffany, at some point. Let me mull that over a little bit, because I'd like to help with that. Sorry, Dr. Sales, go ahead.
Yeah, to be a part of that initiative as well. Yeah.
I think it's important, and I think it's, you can never give up. And taking a lesson from Peggy, from your father, he never gave up. So it's something where obviously you can't, and Tiffany and Dr. Sales and many others that are involved with the organization, and even outside, myself included, I'm happy to do whatever I can. I want to ask you a quick question. First off, because I want to make sure we get this out. So you've got some events coming up. Tiffany, do you want to let the folks know? I think you've got one up in a week's time. It's a one-day fundraiser, golf scramble that's coming up on the 17th. Is that correct? And then you've got the 55th Ted Rhodes Annual Golf Classic at the Ted Rhodes Golf Course in Nashville. What's the dates for that? And where can the folks go if they want to get information about signing up or being involved?
Okay. Well, thank you so much. So we had the Ted Rhodes Windy City Charity Golf Classic that was scheduled for next Saturday. But unfortunately, we just had to cancel that event due to lack of participation and sponsorship, which was very disappointing for us. But, we're both business people, have to look at the financial aspect of it. And therefore, we decided just to cancel that event. But we do have one more adult event that we're really excited about, and that is the 55th Ted Rhodes Charity Golf Classic that is scheduled for September 7th and 8th in Nashville. at the Ted Rhodes Golf Course. So we're excited. This is a milestone year for us. This is, probably our signature, I would say, annual fundraiser. And we have great golf, great food, and great fun as we raise money for our HBCU, a historically black college and university golf education fund. And also we donate funds to the First Tee chapters as well. So this event gives us an opportunity to celebrate my grandfather, but then also raise funds. So there's opportunities for individuals to participate as golfers. We have a non-golfer option for those that don't golf but just want to support our efforts. We also have a donation option for individuals that are not able to participate. We are always open to receiving donations at any time on our website, tedrhodes.org, and we appreciate any support that we can receive. And I
just want to add to that. To Gary's credit, Gary was the first golfer to register for the event this year. So thank you, Gary.
As he should be, as you should be.
Exactly. So we're glad to have him on board. So we're excited about that event. And then, Ted, I just want to mention real quick, our last event of the year will be our Ted Rhodes Junior Championship in Jacksonville, Florida, and that's a partnership with the First Tee of North Florida. So we've got 2 more events to go. We've already done 2 events, and so we are just excited about this year and, looking forward to continuing the legacy and raising funds for all of these great programs.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic.
And we're there filming and interviewing, and we will be including that in the film. So if it gets picked up, and we're hoping for a global audience, the world will know about that tournament. So just trying to do our part. But looking forward to being there and getting the interviews and interviewing the players and you and Peggy, Tiffany, and getting his name out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it's fantastic. And, Peggy, you have done so much, and you have such a great attitude, great smile. And every time I see you, we met a few years ago officially. I mean, I've talked to you many times as with Tiffany on the show. Yes. And back in 2020, literally, I think it was a month and a half before the pandemic, we met physically the first time. And which brings me something. I won't get into it all on air, but you took a picture on somebody's phone of the 3 of us, and I think you had a friend take the picture, and I don't think you ever sent it to me. I don't know if you remember or not. So I know you probably got a lot of photos on your phone, but go back to 2020.
I save all my pictures. Yeah, I know.
Okay,
I have
well,
it. I'm find it and
okay, you know which one I'm talking about. We were arm in arm at the PGA show back in 2020, and then of course Well, I don't think you ever forwarded that photo to me, so I want you to forward that if you wouldn't mind when you get a chance. No rush.
I got you. I'll send that one to you.
And then obviously we bumped into one another again this past January, and the 2 of you. It's funny because both you and Tiffany just are smiling, and I mean after walking around that show, I don't know, because listen, my feet, my dogs, as they say, my feet were so sore and tired by the time we bumped into you, and yet the 2 of you had glowing smiles, and obviously I was excited to bump into you, as well as Gary as well. It was very nice and honored to meet you as well, and glad that you're a part of their organization. So as we get ready to sort of wind down a little bit, I'm going to give each of you a moment or two to just sort of had a crystal ball in front of you, and you were able to envision the future based on what you know now and what Ted's legacy was in the game. What would you like to see and envision in that crystal ball? And I know it sounds a little far out there, but I think you understand the meaning. So Peggy, I'm going to go with you first, then Tiffany, and then Carl, you can sum it up.
Okay.
Okay.
Does that make sense, or do I need to repeat that, or do you understand what I'm asking?
No,
because it's my agenda.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, Gary. What did you say?
No, I already have my answer. I knew that because it's my priority in retirement. It's my ikigai. It's my purpose.
Peggy, go ahead.
All right. Well, in my crystal ball, I see the foundation is growing, providing more opportunities, letting more people know about Ted Rhodes, what he stood for, what he did, what he accomplished. And, just more opportunities, more sponsors, more people, just everything. I think this documentary is a good move forward, so I'm looking forward to that. So that's kind of what I see right now.
I think that's a great vision. Tiffany, what about you?
I would, in my crystal ball, see my grandfather being inducted into the PGA Hall of Fame. I would also see Tiger Woods being at one of our events, or showing up, or us doing something in person with him. Because I'd love to. My mom has met Tiger Woods. I've not had the opportunity. We both have the same initials, TW. So I would love to have the opportunity with him. But to have more corporate involvement, I think is very important, and also have more support from the golf industry. Given the scale and scope of all of the things that my grandfather did, we should have more support than what we have now. And, I think it is lack of awareness, but, we're not hard to find. And it's, it's difficult to get to the individuals that, make the decisions on some of these things. And I think, they should really be reaching out to us, given all of the work that we're doing. So in my crystal ball, I see people reaching out to us from the golf street, from organizations within the golf industry, but also corporate sponsors and donors and things of that nature to help us with this programming, because, this costs money. And so we need the support of the golf industry first and foremost, and then, the corporate sponsorships. And I need Tiger Woods to come to an event, and I need to meet him.
Well, I don't know. I can try. I don't know if I can make that one happen. I'll try my best to see if I can get the words out. I know a few people that know him, so I'll do that. But Gary, go ahead, and I know you want to jump in here as well and add your thoughts, and then I'll sum some things up.
Well, two things. Basically, to keep the African American history of golf in the forefront, which I am doing with my research, my movies, my presentations, and things like that. But one of the things that we didn't talk about tonight is I'm a behavioral psychologist. I work with a lot of tour players, brown skin tour players and amateurs. And the other crystal ball is to continue open the door, and I want to help these kids play at the highest levels. That's the collegiate, win their state tournaments in high school, and play on tour, and travel globally and play the game at the highest levels. So I sponsor a number of kids that play at the highest levels, and this is literally my way of continuing Ted's legacy. He opened the door; it's wide open, and the opportunities are out there. And hopefully, with the movie and the initiatives, I can help Peggy and Tiffany get a hold of those dollars. We're doing our thing here locally in Indiana, and I, like I said, it's possible, but that's my legacy, to see more kids playing at the highest level and to keep our history alive and in the forefront.
Three great visions. And I think what I would like to add to this, and Tiffany, I'm not going to make any promises about Tiger, but I'll see what I can do about some of the other things. Just because listen, I haven't met him face to face. Now I've been close to him when he's been hitting a shot into a green, but I haven't actually had the pleasure yet. So I'm meeting him first. So you're going to have to get in line. But what I do want to say is this, Tiffany, you touched on this, and Dr. Sales, you also mentioned this as well, and I know Peggy has talked about this in the past too. It does take a lot of effort by everybody.
Yep.
As the old saying, all oars have to be in the water to make the boat row in a direction that you want. And I agree with you. I mean, I've been in this business, in the golf industry, for many, many years, and I've seen a lot of good things come through the industry, and I've seen a lot not so good or lacking thereof. I think you're exactly right when you say this day and age, I think there needs to be folks reaching out to you at this point. It's
Right.
not like they don't know who he is. I mean, Tiger,
Right.
I've seen on your website, you've got a paragraph where Tiger has referenced, Teddy Rhodes about how it's opened a door for him. And so there's really no excuse. And I think it's just, again, I'm not going to offer an excuse, but what I will say, my vision in my crystal ball is I've always said that I want to do something that helps other people. So what I'm going to, my promise to you, to all of you, and particularly to the girls, but Peggy and Tiffany, is I'm going to reach out because I have a lot of contacts in the industry, both in the equipment side and others. And I'm going to twist some arms. I'm going to do what I can to point it in a direction. I'll let you take over once it happens, but I'm going to do what I can, and I make that promise to you because I agree. I think if more dollars are pointed in the right direction, many of these youngsters coming up that may have never had an opportunity will at least have a door open for them, and then whether they choose to walk through and grab it. Because like I said in the very beginning, once you're kind of bitten by the golfing bug, I don't care who you are, it's pretty hard. It bites hard sometimes, harder for others, but it bites pretty hard. And I think once some of these youngsters that maybe have never had an opportunity, never had golf in their family, in their livelihood, growing up as youngsters, but get exposed to it, I think they will enjoy it. But it's a matter of making it accessible. And you can't do that. You can't bring, it's great. You can stand on your soapbox and say, hey, here's so-and-so, and here's this, and here's that. But if you don't create a vessel or a walkway for them to step through, or a doorway, whatever metaphor you want to use, then it's for naught. And you're doing everything that you can. It's time for others in the golf industry to do their part. So I'm going to do my part by reaching out to my contacts, and I'm going to say, here's a legacy that needs to continue on. Here's how I think it can happen, but I'm going to pass you on to the people that can tell it best, and that's going to be you guys.
That's perfect.
Deal?
We appreciate it, Ted.
Thank you so much, Ted.
Yeah.
You're quite welcome. It's been a story that I've enjoyed, and I love having you guys back. And Carl, as I said, when your film is completed and you're ready to release, I'm sorry, Gary. I'm sorry. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. I was looking at something else, and I apologize. But anyways, Gary, my apologies. Once that is done, you let me know, and I will be sure to do my part in getting the word out for you, and hopefully it'll get picked up. But I appreciate all that you have done to help both Peggy and Tiffany in support of their foundation and the Ted Rhodes legacy. But any final words that you guys would like to add before we sign off?
I just want to add this. I was thinking about this last Saturday. Our junior tournament was so heartwarming to me. We had children as young as 5 years old playing in the event, and it was like, oh my God, they only played 3 holes, but they were so excited to be announced and to receive trophies and stuff like that. So we are opening the doors for young people who've not had an opportunity to experience that.
Couldn't agree more. And Tiffany, anything finally that you would like to add?
I would just want to thank you so much, Ted, for your support and for having us, on your show so that we can continue to tell the story. We never get tired of telling the story. We enjoy it, as you can see. So thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come on again with Gary to talk about, the work we're doing with the foundation and the upcoming documentary. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. And Gary, I got it right this time. Gary, any final thoughts? My apologies. I really do apologize for that. I don't know why I wrote down something differently, but go ahead.
Ditto to what Tiffany said. Thank you for the platform, and I think the more people that we can pull into our circle, the more recognition we can get. Ultimately, Peggy, Tiffany, Hall of Fame, World Golf Hall of Fame. I am not going to rest until that happens. And Ken, thank you for providing me with an idea. Maybe we need to get some politicians involved with this.
Yeah.
Okay.
I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, you have to put the pressure at the right time, and I think it's well past the time. Many attempts have been made as valid and as honorable as they've been done. But the truth of the matter is, it takes a village that moves mountains, and you can't just do it all by yourself. So you have to reach out and grapple on to whomever you can. So I'm there with you. I'm really to help in any way I can. Don't ever hesitate to reach out, and I will certainly do whatever I can to assist on my end. But I'm gonna be working on the corporate end right now. That's going to be my first and foremost. And when you're ready to do the other about the Hall of Fame, you just give me a ring or an email or what have you, and I'm happy to put some boots on the ground, as they say. But thank you very, very much, all of you, for coming on and helping to keep Teddy Rhodes' legacy alive. I think it's just a wonder. My only regret is I wasn't around to be able to have met him, but I know you've shared some great stories over the years, and I'm happy to at least partake in this aspect of it and honoring his memory. So thank you for coming on and sharing that with my audience tonight.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Have a great rest of the
All right,
evening.
and you will. And if you want to get more information on the upcoming event taking place in September 7th and 8th, go to tedrhodes.org. That's Ted, RHODES.org, and all the information is there. And if you want to donate, make sure you do it. They can certainly appreciate your help. But Peggy, Tiffany, and Gary, thank you very much for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ted.
All right, take care.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. All right, that was my special guest from the Ted Rhodes Foundation, the daughter Peggy Rhodes-White, granddaughter Tiffany White, and Dr. Gary Sales, all from the Ted Rhodes Foundation. Thank you again for coming on and sharing information about the legacy of Ted Rhodes and also some of the things going on at the foundation. Always a pleasure to have them on the show. And also a special thanks to my good friend Pete Buchanan for coming on and helping me navigate through the Coach's Corner panel. Thanks, Pete, for doing a great job always. And I look forward to seeing you the next time. On that note, God bless everybody. Have a great weekend, and I will see you next week right here on Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this week's broadcast of Golf Talk Live. We'd like to thank this week's Coach's Corner panel, and a special thank you to tonight's guest. Remember to join Ted every Thursday from 6 to 8 p.m. Central on Golf Talk Live. And be sure to follow Ted on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you're interested in being a guest on Golf Talk Live, send Ted an email at ted.golftalklive@gmail.com. This has been a production of the iGolf Sports Network.